I followed the oil and the gas trade. And where are the oil and gas lines being built? They had made a deal. And the deal was to move the oil and gas from Russia, sell it to China and India, and use the money to buy the products from India and China to replace those that they wouldn't buy from the West. They didn't have the dollars to do it with. And then you saw it, and it all came together. The Chinese have become the manufacturer of the world. And if it's not Chinese, it's Vietnamese or Bangladeshis. They will sell to Russia. There's no problem. They want that business. They'll sell to Russia. And they make everything. Russians are not going to be deprived of being unable to trade with Western Europe and America because this is what Americans don't get. There's nothing made here that they don't make better and cheaper. I'll give you an example. Electric vehicles, electric car, electric truck. The best electric cars and trucks in the world right now, as we speak, are made in China. It is the world leader in electric cars and trucks. And that's the future of cars and trucks. Okay, the Chinese have the best and the cheapest. Okay, so the whole world is making the transition for reasons of pollution and climate change, but also for reasons of economizing on oil and gas. All of that, they're making the switch. Where are they going to buy it? They're going to buy them in China. Russia can re-equip its entire fleet by buying from China. With what? With the money they get from selling China the oil and gas. It'll run those cars that are still running on oil and gas, plus heat people's homes and make the electricity and all the rest. You can't play the way you did before. If you go to Cuba, they're driving cars made in the 50s. Cobbled together, cannibalized Jeep stuff. Why? Because they can't replace it. But the rest of the world is different. It's like telling Israel, you can't do settler colonialism now. You know that American men are in love with the pickup truck. You got to have boots, sort of like those, boots, and a cowboy hat and a pickup truck, and you're a real man. Okay. Why is that? Is there something uniquely muscular about a pickup truck? No. Here's the reason. In the 1960s, the American car companies suddenly confronted real competition, which they hadn't for quite a while, mostly because of World War II. Ford, General Motors, Chrysler competition. Where was it coming from? Europe. VW, Peugeot, Theat, the producers there. They were coming back from the destruction of World War II, and they all understood they have to beat the United States because we were the hegemon. So they knew they had to produce a car that was better and cheaper. If they could do that, like the VW Bug, then they could break the market because Americans were producing those boats on wheels, the old Chevy or the old Suey car. Anyway, American Automobile Company went bonkers, losing money. A deal was struck. End result of the deal, a tariff. The Europeans accepted a tariff on the truck. 25%, that's a lot in the car business. So any truck coming from Europe, pickup truck, you'd have to pay the price of that truck plus 25 cents to Uncle Sam as a tariff tag in order to bring it in. So they couldn't do it. It meant for the American car companies, which is why they pushed for it, freebie. You could now produce your truck, and you could jack up the price by 20%, because that would still be less than they coming in having to pay 25%. But you would keep the profits yourself. So they did. And that's why they advertised trucks as manly symbols to every one of those 19-year-old wannabes who felt much larger and much more attractive to their potential girlfriend by having a truck. It had nothing to do with it. It was a deal. They advertised that because that was where the profit was, in a way that wasn't available on a sedan or a regular truck, etc., etc. Okay, what was the tariff until 6 months ago? What was the tariff on electric trucks and cars from China? 27.5% more. Biden 6 months ago raised it to 100%. If you go to Europe today, 1/4 of all the electric vehicles on the road in Europe are Chinese. If you go to the United States, not 1/4, zero. By the way, the biggest Chinese company, I'm going to ask you, you ever heard of it? Who makes cars and trucks? Is it a name like Chevy or Ford? BYD, 3 initials. It's the Colossus of China that makes electric vehicles. It's the largest seller of electric vehicles in Europe. It's not Tesla, it's them. They've outdone Tesla. Tesla's in China too, but BYD in China is the core company. This is a summary of all of what is going on. The United States is thereby, and that's the point, isolating itself. We are the place where there are no cheap electric vehicles. Why? We are the sufferers. I'll give you an example. Take a company A that makes whatever it is, shoes or camera equipment, doesn't matter. Any company in the United States making something. Take its competitor in Europe or Asia or Africa, who also makes that thing, and they both try to sell whatever that thing is in the world economy. The American company is going to have to, for reasons of law and so, switch to electric trucks and electric cars for their salespeople and to bring in their inputs, and they're going to have to pay more for the electric. Why? Because American companies they're doing with electric what they did with the pickup truck, charging a very high price. Try to go out and buy an electric car, you'll see. Price very high, unless you have one. You'll see quickly. Prices are high because they're artificially protected by the tariff. But the competitor doesn't have that problem. The European competitor who's making the same watch that you and I are thinking about buying for our boyfriends or girlfriends, we're going to get a better deal from the European because he's got cheaper inputs, like electric or American. So the American company got nothing to do with electric vehicles is going to be hurt by it. They don't get this. Just like everybody understood that Russia and China could buy all the gas and oil Russia can produce for the next 50 years. Do we really want to develop that business? Because when the war in Ukraine is over, the Russians might decide we're not going to sell to Europe. Why should we risk them doing that to us again? We're going with our new buddies. By the way, that's where they're building the pipelines, which will be another big argument to stay with that. They've invested enormous amounts of money in building pipelines from Russia into India and into China. There were some already. They've expanded all. You're cementing in the isolation of the United States. China's official self-definition, mainland China, is socialism with Chinese characteristics. That's what they call their society, and they have for many years. By the way, no country called itself communist. It's the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, not communism was the name of the party that fought for socialism. That's been true everywhere. Only in the United States, where socialist and communist are just synonyms. They are communist Russia, communist China. The Russians never called their society communist, and the Chinese never did either. None of them. Mao didn't, Lenin didn't, none of them. They called themselves socialist. Socialism was what comes after, in their view, capitalism. The goal of socialism is to go much further to something called communism. The leader of Spain right now, a man named Pedro Sanchez, is the head of something called the Socialist Party of Spain. The largest bloc of seats in the French National Assembly is now in the hands of a party called the New Popular Front. The leader of that, a man named Jean-Luc Mélenchon. His party has the most seats. He was in the Communist Party of France. He left it and became part of the Socialist Party of France. He now runs the party called France Unbowed. That's part of the New Front Populaire. And he's the de facto leader in France. He's a socialist. All of that makes perfect sense in French politics because there's a socialist party and separately a communist party, and they don't get along. And they haven't for a long time. Why? Because in many French families, there are people who are socialists and people who are communists and people who are neither. And they all get together on a picnic at the park at the same time. That's normal in a lot of European countries. Americans can't get their heads around, right? Europeans have all been connected in one way or another to socialists and communists. The métro, it's a wonderful system. In Paris, really gets you around everywhere. Everybody uses it. It is unionized, has been for decades. And that union is closely affiliated with the Communist Party. You got on a train driven by a communist, cleaned by a communist. You're an American tourist. You had no idea. Your life was in the hands of all these communists. For some people, socialism is very minimally understood.